Respite events at Bcle are an opportunity to bless families and volunteers in our congregation and the community. Kids with special needs and their siblings, birth through age 14, have an evening of fun here at the church while their parents get a few hours off duty. Each guest is paired with a volunteer buddy, and they get to choose from all kinds of fun activities in a loving and safe environment. We end the night by gathering in Lakeview Hall for a few worship songs. These events are designed to give parents a bit of a break from their caregiving responsibilities, but our guests and volunteers of all ages love it too. Caring for families impacted by disability is part of who we are at Bcle, and respite events are a tangible way for our congregation and individual volunteers, young and seasoned, to demonstrate that commitment.
Hey everybody! Wanted to take the time to share with you guys tonight some exciting announcements that are happening in the life of Bridge City Church and Bcle, and for that fact, Bay Presbyterian Church. We want to thank you all for taking the time out on your week and being with us probably after dinner to be here. And so if you had an opportunity to meet me, my name is Keon. I'm the planting pastor at Bridge City Church.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Pastor Jack, pastor of missions at Bcle and director of Bcle. And to those of you who were tuning in, expecting us to be wearing boxing gloves, I apologize about the gimmick picture, but it was memorable, and now you're here, so welcome. We are so happy you're here. And Keon, I love the fact that when you said, "Hi, everybody," you paused in true pastor form, waiting for a response from the congregation, because that was instantly my instinct too, and then realized, oh yeah, they're there, but we're not going to be able to hear them respond. But
that's right.
We are glad that you are joining us tonight online, and we're going to give just a couple of minutes before we start our video tonight. And then remember that as soon as the video is done, that'll give you the update about Bridge City and Bcle that you're looking for. We will come back into this format for a live Q&A, and you'll be able to leave your comments and questions. So you can actually start putting those into the video section into the chat section if you want to. And that way we can have a little bit of a heads up of some of the questions you might have and perhaps give a better answer.
Yeah, we've got quite a few people live already, so we want you to know that as you're thinking through and watching the video with us, you can put in questions or comments, and so those of you who are already in the chat, why don't you just say hello to us, and you can tell us which one of us is your favorite pastor. It's okay.
That's awful, Kia.
Oh, no, I'm joking. Don't hurt my feelings like that. We'll keep it a secret. I know Jack is he's my favorite pastor. I put it that way. But
change the subject.
But yeah, we're excited to be here, and so please take the time. If you've got questions or if you're thinking about them, put them in the chat. Wave hello, and we'll get the video started in just a second here. But we wanted to give the folks a few more moments to get online to hear our update. We got over 50 people live watching this.
Oh, that's just those who have zoomed in. There's watch parties happening at houses, and there's 20 or 30 people for every single one of those logins, Keon. So
Okay, I did not know that, but I'm sure that if someone thought we were actually about to have a boxing match, that there would be quite a few people lined up to see.
you just spoiled the fun, and the numbers dropped to 2 who are left.
Exactly. We are not about to box.
One quick thing I want to mention: if you, we've had a few people ask, is there going to be an opportunity to watch this later? And obviously, if you're Zoom or if you're watching now, you're not concerned about that. But you may be talking to people either at Bcle or Bridge City or New Life at Calvary who say that they wanted to catch the video tonight, the online premiere, and weren't able to, and might be wondering how to find that later. On the Bcle side of things, you can go to the website, bcle.org, and find the missions page, and that's where this video, along with the Q&A that's going to follow, will rest. And on Bridge City, you can go to the Bridge City's YouTube page, subscribe to that, and the video will be in that feed as well. So again, just a reminder before we get ready to kick off with the video, you can go ahead and pop a few questions into the chat. Let us know you're there, and that'll give us a chance to look at those before we do have the live Q&A after the video runs. And video is roughly 15 minutes, and then we'll stick around for Q&A. We're going to get started now. Thanks.
Hey friends, my name is Keon. I'm the planting pastor of Bridge City Church.
And I'm Pastor Jack, pastor of missions at Bcle and director of Bridge CLE.
We wanted to take a quick second to sit down with some friends here, but also to share with you our friends at Bay Presbyterian Church, Bridge City Church, and New Life at Calvary, some exciting updates of what will be happening with Bridge City Church and Bridge CLE coming up here just shortly.
Bridge CLE is a very much a vital part of Bridge City Church, and so when the church was planted 3 years ago, we were looking at how we weave these two ministries together, both a church that worships well and a church that faces the community and works within the community well. So that's kind of where the journey started for Bridge City and Bridge CLE.
Yeah, I think one of the earlier statements you made when speaking in your introduction when you came on staff was that, teaching people to swim or teaching people to fish versus giving them a fish, but then depolluting the waters that the fish are in. And I think of our ministry as both making disciples of Jesus and also trying to help overcome the obstacles that make Jesus harder to get to. And that's how Bridge CLE and Bridge City Church have worked together since the beginning. Bcle and New Life at Calvary had a desire to plant a church together, and it came at a time where the country was dealing with a lot of social and racial division. And we felt that the best response, the best solution and answer to that division was the gospel. And in planting a church that would be an intentionally multi-ethnic church in the heart of our city, we felt how fitting for a predominantly white suburban church and a predominantly black inner city church to come together to plant a church in the most diverse part of the city as an answer to division in our world.
And here we are 3 years later.
3 years later, it's been a lifetime, man.
3 years and a few gray hairs.
That's right, just a few.
I think as we hit that 3-year mark when Bridge City was launched, and because it was the spring of 2021 when we first started our evening services every few months to give people a feel for what the church was going to be. So it's a 3-year mark of when the church was launched and when we started to redevelop what was the Family Ministry Center into Bridge CLE, and we had an original, I guess, commission from the church to both plant a church that was contextually relevant to the community that it's in, but also enable that church to serve in a way that is unique and unusual for a lot of congregations. And I know my own background, I've been both a pastor and a nonprofit director, and I've seen the benefits and gifts of both, and been a part of churches that worship well and that fellowship well, but sometimes struggle to go outside the walls. And then as a nonprofit director, I've been a part of organizations that serve well, but really have a hard time helping people really know what it means to follow Jesus and to express that faith in a way that's glorifying to God. And so we set out not knowing what it was going to be to weave these two together. And the phrase I remember from the early days that kept coming up for the conversations we had was cast the vision, but hold it loosely. And so really it's been in the last 6 months that the vision God has for us has crystallized. And for Bridge City, that mission is to partner in the restoring grace of Jesus. And for Bridge CLE, that mission is to partner in the restoration of people and communities to wholeness. And I think it's easy, or it's helpful to think about that, like, for people who have a history in the church or as Christians, they understand what partnering in the restoring grace of Jesus looks like. They understand the wholeness that comes with that. But for those who aren't a part of the church, they may not understand that. And so that's where Bridge CLE's mission, partnering in the restoration of people and communities to wholeness, I think puts things out there in a way that people who maybe don't have a Christian background can understand what it is that we're about.
I always think about the story in the Gospel of Mark where a paralytic man is trying desperately to get to Jesus as Jesus is ministering in a house church. And because the church was so full, they couldn't bring the paralytic man to the door. So they brought him over to the roof, tore a hole in the roof, and lowered him down for Jesus. And Jesus did two things. He healed the man of his disease that caused him to be paralyzed, but then he also gave them the gift of salvation. And I always think about that in terms of our urgent need and our greatest need. All of our greatest need is Jesus, but there are all types of urgent needs that come up that create barriers. And I think that it's important that to reveal and recognize that Jesus cares about both. And so the church, as an agent of Jesus, should be interested in meeting people's urgent needs, as well as helping them to be resolved at their greatest need, which is Jesus and the gospel. And that's really what Bridge City and Bridge CLE exists to do together.
As I mentioned, the mission of Bridge City is to partner in the restoring grace of Jesus, and the mission of Bridge CLE is to partner in the restoration of people and communities to wholeness. The question is, how does that happen? What does that look like? And how does that ministry get accomplished? That's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where things are I would say different for Bridge City and Bridge CLE than a traditional church or a traditional nonprofit. Because by weaving those two things together, it's in the how that we really see the kingdom of God demonstrated. We see the peace, the fairness, the wholeness of what Jesus preached about when he taught the kingdom, or the Sermon on the Mount, and gave us a picture of what the kingdom looks like. That's where it is. And so for the how, we've interwoven the strategies of how Bridge CLE operates and how Bridge City operates, so that there is intentionality in the work that's done and strategy that aligns with a set of shared values. Our values are the same. We get this wonderful thing here that unpacks all of them, but our values are the image of God in all people, unity through reconciliation, the gifts of every believer, collaboration in the city, and reconciliation through resilience. And so the work that Bridge City does, even though there's a lot of common points that most churches do, such as fellowship groups and classes and service opportunities, it's aligning with the work that Bridge CLE does every single day through Threaded CLE, through our resilience ministry, and through our prison ministry. But where the strategy really connects the dots is also within the work of some of our campus and our community partners, because we've had numerous people that have connected with us through one of our campus partners, for example, Community Service Alliance, where it's transitional housing for formerly homeless men. They come to the community, like what Keon was talking about, with having some needs that have to be met. And in meeting that need, there's the community of the church is able to wrap around them. Those services, those places kind of become entry points into the church.
I think one of the biggest wins for us as a church, for me pastorally, is so many people who have felt either unsafe in spaces like this, have come to not only know Jesus, but they feel like they belong here. They feel like this is their community. So many times we hear from people, I've never been to a church like this. I've never been to a church that preaches the Bible and is welcoming. And I think the other piece of the puzzle is that we can't hide from is just the stability of the church. When you start a church, there's a lot of risk involved. We don't know who's going to come. We don't know what staff members we're going to be able to have. We don't know what types of things we're going to be able to do. But since Bridge City has opened, we have progressed in every area: membership, attendance, finance, staffing. We've continued to grow because our needs have continued to grow. And there's never been a concern about whether or not God has provided what we need to do what he's calling us to do. And that's mind-blowing.
I think a major encouragement that I've seen as both ministries have grown over the last 3 years is the way that they feed into and encourage one another. When we first launched Bridge City, there was a core team of roughly 60 people from both Bcle and New Life at Calvary, and it was mostly white and black. But as the church has continued to grow, it has truly become a multi-ethnic congregation of at least 3 times the size of what it was when we launched 3 years ago. And through that community of faith, there have been people within the church who have then fed into the ministries of Bcle and engaged in service and in the community and partnership, by helping people in communities to wholeness. And then through those ministries, there have been people who have come in and connected with the church through the service. And so that bi-directional flow of fellowship along with service really is creating the expression of the kingdom that we had hoped for from the beginning.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to recognize that church plants shouldn't stay church plants forever. And so in our particular tradition, a church plant starts off as a growing congregation, and it's normally parented by an existing church. And that parent church supports and oversees and governs the church plant until it localizes into a fully grown congregation. And Bridge City is finally up at the point where we are being considered for localization as a church, where we come out of the church plant stage into a full grown church, kind of like when child leaves the nest. And we've been using this analogy at our churches for quite some time now, that Bridge City is a church plant. It's a baby of Bcle and New Life at Calvary. That baby went off to school when we launched this church, and I think we're getting ready for that baby to graduate and get his own place. and
by God's grace, Bridge City grew and is ready to localize, is ready to leave the nest faster than most church plants do.
That's right. So, Jack, what would Presbytery say is, the milestones that a church needs to be ready to localize?
They have to basically be financially independent and able to stand on their own, and they have to have elders who are trained, equipped, and called to lead the church. And because of our parent churches, we have been very blessed to be that almost from day one. And so we just are so grateful to both Bcle and New Life at Calvary for having launched the church, because it launched well.
That's right.
So even though Bridge City was launched by both Bcle and New Life at Calvary, it's technically under the full umbrella legally and ecclesiastically of Bcle. And so Bcle has created the session of Bcle has created a task force made up of members of both congregations to help manage the process for Bridge City to become localized. Once that happens, then the question becomes, what does this mean for Bridge CLE? Because Bridge CLE is intertwined and really inseparable from Bridge City. It's connected relationally and missionally to Bridge City, and also connected financially, historically, relationally to Bcle. And so if Bridge CLE was intended from the beginning to be the mission arm of both congregations, then what does it mean when Bridge CLE is literally between two independent localized congregations? And so there's a task force that's looking at all of that, bringing recommendations back to the Bcle session, and then the session will make decisions and keep the church informed of all of that as the process goes.
When a church plant normally starts, it's normally all on a church planter or a small team to kind of manage everything and know all the answers and do everything. And I think one of the most substantial ways Bcle has supported us is being able to share and work with staff members to launch our church. Our staff at Bridge City always has an expert they can call and someone who's been down this road before to figure out, how do we handle this? Where do we purchase this? What do we do about this? What did you all do with this? And so we've been able to work with and share in the expertise of the staff of BPC to launch our church. And they've been here pretty much every step of the way, helping us with the different areas of ministry. And to this day, we can call and say, hey, we ran out of communion. Can you help us out? And vice versa.
Yeah, and I would say, even on top of that, Keon is pastor of Bridge City Church, but I'm pastor of missions for Bcle as well. And so, what Bcle has helped bring to the table to make Bridge City come into fruition and be ready to localize, it's not just the people and expertise that Keon mentioned, but it's the whole vision. I mean, we're sitting right now in a sanctuary on a campus that Bcle had a vision for over a decade ago to purchase and say, we want to invest in this community. As director of Bridge CLE, we're developing those social ministries and programs that connect into the life of Bridge City. And so without that vision to say we want to do something different, church planting isn't just about counting numbers of baptisms, but it is about partnering in the restoration of people and communities to wholeness. Without that vision and without that commitment, we're not sitting here today at all.
If you're asking how you can pray, I'd say number one, definitely pray for the task force and their discernment as they move through their long list of things to cover. And then pray for the mindset of those in the church, that they would keep the fresh babe mindset of new believers in Christ with a heart and a zeal to keep going after mission and whatever God is calling us to do.
And I'd ask for prayers for wisdom, for discernment, and for grace to abound as it relates to Bridge CLE, because the future for Bridge City, it's a little bit easier to see. It's already a flourishing, growing congregation that has a healthy community of people that love the congregation. Bridge CLE, as that ministry that really unites Bridge City and Bcle, but is inseparable from Bridge City, but owned by Bcle, it's a little less clear how we continue to keep those family connections together, how we continue to develop partnerships. And it's going to take wisdom and grace in order to continue to build on the history and the tradition that we've had, and to do it well. Well, thanks for taking the time to spend with us today, and may God bless you. Continue to keep those family connections together, how we continue to develop partnership.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our video. And you see, it's not an all-out boxing match, pastoral brawl, if you will. We'd like to take the time to also say that right now we're going to enter into a period of questions, Q&A. And so if you've got questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We are watching the chat and are going to take some of the questions. We already see some coming through. So thank you for going ahead and put some of those answers. Um, yeah, take the time to give some of those questions now. So I'll start with one of the first questions we have here is a missions program or guide overview available that will help congregation members in choosing where and how to dial in to support the Bridge CLE operation? PJ, I think you can take that one.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Thanks, Stu, for your question. Yes, there is a guide. We have been putting out a missions engagement guide quarterly now. And so we're almost a year into that. But I know in the gathering area, the gallery area, lobby, whatever you want to call it at Bay Pres, there is a wall rack with a lot of different resources. And one there is the missions guide that has ways that people from the congregation can join with different mission partners. We don't have all of them listed because we have too many, but every quarter we feature 3 of them. We actually have one that is coming out this coming Sunday. If you're in worship at Bay Pres, there will be one handed out that highlights some of what's happening with Bridge City and Bridge CLE. But I know your question is in particular about like Bridge City and Bridge CLE, and even I think probably embedded in with that is the implication of what's happening on the campus with some of our mission partners, particularly those like the Bridge Avenue School that was launched out of Bay Pres. You can go to the Bay Pres missions website, and it lists, I believe, all of our partners. But the best thing to do as you get information about them is to just reach out to me or our missions coordinator, Tammy Winkelhofer. If you reach out to me, I can get you to Tammy. Tammy's great at listening to what people are interested in, and she's very much up to speed on what's happening on both on our campus and with our city partners, and can point people in a direction that might serve whatever their needs are and their interests. So thanks for that question, Stu.
Yeah. Second question is, who is serving on the task force? How is the task force seeking community input? And what criteria was used in creating the task force personnel makeup? So I think, Jack, we can break that up together. I'll start with the first question and the third question, and you fill in whatever all the other pieces.
Well, this shows how much we think alike, Keon, because I was thinking we could break it up, but I was thinking I would take the first and the third, and you would take the second.
Well, hey, I think here I'll take the third and you take the first, but they're linked together. So I'd say the task force is made, and that's a great question. The task force is made up of officers of the board and session from both churches, Bay Presbyterian and New Life at Bridge City, and so elder representation as well as board members, because the primary criteria is settling a lot of the operational and fiduciary commitments to the ministry, like articles of incorporation, filing, and all of those things. Jack, take it from there as the leader of the task force.
I'm coordinator of the task force, not leader, but as session considered what was necessary in making up the task force, they were looking for people who had experience, in particular, in some of the areas that we're going to be dealing with on the Bridge City and Bridge CLE side, like for the financial operations. And so there's people who not only have experience with those, but have particular foot in both aspects. You know, they have connections with Bay Pres as well as Bridge City, or at least are very informed about what's happening in the life of those ministries. As far as community input goes, both ministries are under the umbrella of the church, but they are governed and dictated by session. And so there's not necessarily community input in terms of like Bridge City localizing. That was a piece of the plan from day one. And the voice of Bridge City's congregation will actually be heard at a later date when it comes to votes on localization and things like that. For the Bridge CLE side, that's where, we're trying through this avenues like this, and this is the first really time that we have shared with the church that this task force is now functioning, and has a particular commission from session. But basically, we are we're putting out the information now so that people can get back with questions. If you do have questions, you can go to the questions@bpres.org email address. If you're on the Bridge City side, you can just email myself or Pastor Keon directly. But getting people aware of what's happening so that they can then provide feedback informally. However, on June 9th, there will be task force members who come to Bpres for a Q&A session to find out, what people are thinking, what they're asking, but also that would be a place where people could share thoughts, questions, concerns, all of that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so just to reiterate, that the point of the task force is not necessarily to determine ministry direction of Bridge City Church, but more so settling what Presbytery would require from the congregation to be ready to consider itself a local independent congregation. But in terms of what happens on the day-to-day ministry, that's not what the task force will be managing. That's left in-house to the leaders, elders, and officers at Bridge City Church. Another question is, how much support does BPC give financially to the ministry? Sounds like it's going to be independent soon.
That's one you're grinning for me to take, right?
Go ahead, PJ. Go ahead.
I could look in the chat, and I think you're next. You're up for the next one. Another great question, and the question was, how much support does BPC give to the ministry? I'm going to answer it in two parts because there's really two ministries. And for Bridge City, Bpres of course, provides the campus for Bridge City to worship in. And when the church first launched, that was all given gratis just for the space, and all of the expenses were covered by Bpres through Bridge CLE. Now Bridge City is paying its full utilities as well as some measure of rent, because those expenses, of course, come out of our pocket otherwise, but the church is paying for its daily use, so to speak, in terms of occupying the space. And then the rent is, by paying rent, it's helping to funnel and it's helping to fund other work at Bridge CLE. So that was the early days. And then as far as staffing goes, there was those who are part of Bpres will remember the early offerings for the church to launch. And so church graciously and generously gave, which really allowed Bridge City to start with an operating fund and form its staff and do all those kinds of things. Right now, Bridge City is financially solvent from the standpoint of it. Bpres does not have to augment the bills. It's meeting its budget. It's in the black, basically breaking even, and it does have an operating reserve to be able to function as an independent church, which is one of the criteria for it to localize. On the Bridge CLE side, the Bpres missions budget is 10% of the church's overall budget every year, and the church's unrestricted revenue was roughly $3 million last year. So the mission budget is $300,000, and of that, $150,000 is used for Bridge CLE's ministry. The other $150,000 is used to be given out to local mission partners in the city, as well as our global partners in mission. And the thinking behind that is that the work we're doing at Bridge CLE through our subsidizing of city partners like Community Service Alliance or Feeding Souls or the Bridge Avenue School or any of our other campus mission partners is providing a monetary value to those nonprofit ministries. We also have our own nonprofit ministries like the Resilience Ministry and the Prison Ministry that are doing direct service just like any other nonprofit were. So by funneling funds to Bridge CLE, we are funding a ministry, a mission that is technically a part of the church, but it's doing the same kind of mission work as any other mission partner in the city. And that's $150,000 that comes to Bridge CLE out of the church mission budget, is about 1/3 of Bridge CLE's overall budget. The other 300,000 comes from other sources like rent and grants and things like that. Great question. Thanks.
Wonderful, wonderful. Another question: as a localized church, how will BCC relate to EPC and ECO? Another good question. So currently, as a localized congregation, Bridge City Church is it's a church plant of Bay Presbyterian Church, and therefore is under the government and polity of the Evangelical Presbyterian Church. But most of you know that Pastor Jack and I, we come from another world of Presbyterians called ECO, and so that's the ministry that we come from, and that's the ministry that New Life at Calvary, the denomination that New Life at Calvary is a part of. And so Bridge City will localize as a evangelical Presbyterian church with hopes to begin the discussions in the congregation about hopes to unionize, due to the fact that we're Bridge. It's in our name, and we've done ministry to Bridge in our city as well as in other areas of ministry. So we are going to relate to EPC as our denomination, with continued support and fellowship and networking with ECO, and hopes to eventually one day unionize with both.
All right, thanks, Keon. And I think the next question I can take. This is working well for us to just be able to alternate back and forth. There's a question on whether we will continue to rotate into the pulpit through the foreseeable future as partners in ministry. And I would say I certainly would hope so. And the first thing I want to point out is that while Keon is pastor of Bridge City Church and has over the years now more and more almost full responsibility shepherding that congregation and leading and guiding it, I still have responsibilities at Bay Pres. And how much, though, the question will be, it'll be on what the task force recommends to the session of Bay Pres, as far as what that alignment looks like and how much Bay Pres is involved in the ministry, all those kinds of things. That then will determine how much responsibility I have it back at Bay Pres. But there's part of the task force commission is to make sure we come up with a plan, a covenant, if you will, for maintaining healthy family ties within the two congregations. The part of Bridge CLE's original mission, when we were commissioned to both plant the church and then redevelop the Family Ministry Center into Bridge CLE, it was for Bridge CLE to be a mission place, both physically, geographically, but spiritually, where relationships were built between the two congregations. And so we'll continue to walk into that. The question just becomes is what that looks like. And we want to make sure that we are clear that both sessions agree on a covenant of how the churches will continue to engage in ministry together, work together, build relationships, keep that connection. And I would certainly hope and think that some sort of pulpit exchange at various points would be a part of that.
Yep. And true to nature, the next question lines right up my alley. And the question is, what does ECO stand for, and what does it mean to unionize? And so ECO is a nickname for the denomination called A Covenant Order of Evangelical Presbyterians. And so which is very similar to Evangelical Presbyterian Church, which can tell you why we think it makes sense to unionize as a congregation. And so the definition of unionizing, it's when a church choose to come up under the sponsorship and umbrella of both denominations. And so instead of us just being an EPC church or just being an ECO church, we would be a congregation that supports, subscribe, and is affirmed and sponsored by both denominations. So similar to the way that we were started by an ECO church and an EPC church, the church plant would have both legacies, both heritage as a denomination for itself. I hope that answers that question.
I want to go back and address one. It does look like we've gotten to the end of our chat, so we want to encourage folks, if you have continuing questions or a clarification, we didn't fully answer the question you were looking for, go ahead and pop that in there. But as that's happening, I was scrolling through the chat to look at questions, and one point of a question I didn't fully address that was connected with the finances said it sounds like you're going to be independent soon. And again, just that's a two-part thing. Bridge City is working toward localization, which the word independence kind of carries with it a lot of, I guess, preconceived notions, and we don't want to convey the idea of independent, meaning Bridge City gets to now, be apart, and Bay Pres does its thing, and even New Life at Calvary as another mother church does its thing. No, part of the point of the two churches coming together to plant Bridge City was to develop deeper family connections. But yes, Bridge City will be localizing, and we hope that will happen toward the end of this year, by the end of 2024. But that is not a hardened date. There's a lot of things that have to happen. There's, Bay Pres helps. It basically does all the back office functions for finances and HR for Bridge City. Those things have to be decoupled, if you will. And then Bridge City needs to file some papers with the state to become its own legal entity and all that. So that process toward independence, or localization, as we're calling it, is certainly set in motion for Bridge City. Bridge CLE, though, that's a whole different animal. It's very tied to both congregations, and of course, Bay Pres has ownership of the campus and the ministry, and everyone who works there. We're all Bay Pres staff members. The question becomes, though, what it looks like for Bridge CLE to do its ministry and its work, knowing how integrated it is with Bridge City, and Bridge City does become a localized congregation. How can we keep those family ties together, with Bridge CLE in the middle? And there's been multiple options that have been bantered about, but it's all in very much draft form right now. And there's a lot of things that need to develop. Everything from, Bay Pres continuing to kind of own and operate Bridge CLE and contribute as much as it does now, to Bridge CLE becoming its own standalone nonprofit with influence, input, and resources from both churches. And what does that look like? We just don't have answers to those questions yet, but we do understand and acknowledge that, over the years, there's been a lessening understanding within Bay Pres as to what Bridge CLE is. Because when the campus was first bought over a decade ago, there was a lot of engagement in the church. It was rally the troops time. People volunteered, they served, they gave money for the ministry that became the Family Ministry Center. And then there was a lot of transition at the church from 2016 to 2018. And by 2018, there was consideration to even sell the campus. Then in 2019, it was announced that Bridge City was going to be launched. And the point of the ministry there would be to redevelop social ministry in conjunction with a church, so that as disciples were made, it happened through the work. It was the work of the campus, and the ministries and the partners were all supporting that. And then, here we are today. And so there's been changing ground, I'll say, for Bridge CLE, and the hope and the goal through the work of the task force and the recommendations that would be made to session, and the final decisions that session makes and takes to the congregation, would be that ground is now solid, and it's clear, and everybody understands what Bridge CLE is, what's the relationship with the two churches, what do we do, and how are we going to fund that, resource it, support it in the future moving forward. And that plan will hopefully be in place by the time the next pastor comes for Bay Pres, because that's part of the VCM process. And all of this came about, initiated by Pastor Rick through the VCM process, to say we need to have this stable ground, so that the next the next pastor understands what they're getting with all of this in the church, and the church knows, and the church has made the decision, and it's not up for change as somebody new comes in. Any other chats come in, Keon?
Yeah, a ton. So
that's what happens when when I get rolling and talking and don't shut up.
So Jack, why don't you answer this next one too, and then I'll take some of these some of these questions could be combined. So can you tell us what excites you about ministry in the Clark Fulton neighborhood? What's the vibe, PJ?
Um, I love I guess I would say the grittiness of the of life. You know, the it's a meeting place. Clark Fulton, you know, there's it's such an intersection of so many different people from so many walks of life, socioeconomically, ethnically, but you've got, you know, you're right on the verge of gentrification, and I know that's a whole mixed bag of things, but you know, you go a few blocks this way and you've got that Ohio City feel. You go a few blocks that way and you've got the feel of stockyards in a neighborhood that really needs a lot of support and engagement. And to be at the cross section in the middle of all of that, it's really it kind of just, it feels like it's where life is happening. And I would translate that over to Bridge City too, because Bridge City, as a very diverse congregation, has that same vibe. You have people that come in that look like they just walked in from Ohio City, and you have people that come in that look like they walked in, literally slept on the street that night, and everything in between, all walks of life, from very mature believer to seeker. I mean, and then, you know, it's just, it's a real snapshot of humanity, and that's really, it's exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, I will never forget our first caroling trip where every house was a different ethnic group. Every knocking on doors, that every house was different, and just the ways in which you can see God's beauty and diversity there. So, a couple of questions. So, number one, what role does and did New Life at Calvary play at this point? New Life at Calvary plays an advisory role in the life of the church, and so when we set out to plant, it was very important that Bridge City kind of had one mother church of a home base. And so Bay Pres became that home base, which is why kind of Jack and I come from ministry at Bay Pres and continue to support in that way. And so New Life at Calvary is involved in an advisory format of just staying in the loop of what's going on, offering support when possible, and celebrating opportunities for different moments in the life of the church. Some of you know that Pastor Kelly came over and spoke at Bay Pres a couple of years ago, and she comes to Bridge City just about every year to share with us as well. And so it's the same type of thing, as you can continue to be praying for New Life at Calvary with the transitions with their building and their roof. They have expressed a number of times how grateful they have been that Bay Pres has been on the other side of that, supporting in the work and ministry of Bridge City. So the next couple of questions were, are there any other U.S. churches that are unionized, the EPC and ECO? And is there an existing relationship between EPC and ECO presbyteries that you can speak to? So I'd say the first one is no, there are no other U.S. congregations that are unionized between the EPC and ECO. We would actually be the first unionized congregation of these two Presbyterian denominations. The second one is there existing relationship between the EPC and ECO? Yes. EPC and ECO, these two denominations have an existing what's called fraternal relationship. And a fraternal relationship allows us to share in ministry. As you know, some pastors are transferred into the EPC and out of the EPC into ECO to serve different churches. We come together annually for a small church pastors event. And so there, and also the leaders, as you know, I had served on the board of our denomination in ECO for a little while, and every national gathering included representatives from each denomination to support. And so there is a lot of brotherly, sisterly love between EPC and ECO. And so, you know, we're not brothers and sisters just yet. We're like cousins. Real close cousins. And so
Just like Keon and I.
exactly. We look just alike. And so that's the ministry of the two denominations. And so, guys, we just want to again say thank you for taking the time to be with us to watch the video. And as Jack has mentioned a number of times, please reach out and ask your questions. We want to know what other questions there are. We want to speak to all those things, and also things that we have not considered. We are open as you all continue to ask and throw things out there. It really helps us as a leadership and as a task force to be thinking through things. And let's just continue to praise God. I still can't believe that it was 4 years ago that I kind of walked into BPC for the first time in like 12, 15 years, because I hadn't been there since I was a kid. And look at what God has done in 4 years. We have planted a church, rebirthed a ministry that is living out a holistic witness of partnering together to the restoration of people to wholeness. And we could not have done this on our own. It's not because of anybody's gifts or anybody's expertise or any power or influence, but because of the Lord, and because the Lord has done it. And I always think about the scripture that says, God has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And so we praise God for that. We praise God for all of you who have watched and prayed and supported and given and volunteered to see it. We are not done yet. I think it's a good way to say that we are just getting started, and the best is yet to come of what God is going to do in and through the ministries of Bay Presbyterian Church, Bridge CLE, Bridge City Church, and New Life at Calvary. So thank you guys. And one day me and Jack might put on some boxing gloves and give y'all what y'all looking for.
See,
But not today.
try and time it to the
screen.
Not today. Thanks, everyone. Remember, questions at baypres.org or on the Bridge City side, just email me or Pastor Keon. We will get back to you. And thank you so much for tuning in, and so appreciate your interest and your support. And God bless you, and good night.